My wife threw me out of the companies after believing her new intern's lies 3 weeks later. She asked if I'd reflected. Instead, I handed her divorce and resignation papers. She lost it. You know that gut feeling when something feels off at work? Like when everyone suddenly stops talking the moment you enter the room. And suddenly they're all very interested in their computer screens like they're watching the season finale of their favorite show. Yeah, that was my Monday morning. And let me tell you, it wasn't because someone finally figured out who kept stealing lunches from the break room fridge. I walked into the office at exactly 8:15, same as I had for the past 6 years, carrying my usual overpriced coffee that I pretended was worth $7, and the entire floor went silent. Not the comfortable kind of silent where people are focused on work, but that awkward, suffocating silence you get at a funeral when someone's phone goes off playing, "Who let the dogs out?" Sandra from accounting literally minimized her screen so fast I'm pretty sure she broke a finger. Mike from sales suddenly found his stapler absolutely fascinating, turning it over in his hands like it was an ancient artifact he'd just discovered. Even Barry, the guy who never shuts up about his fantasy football league, looked at me and then immediately pretended to take an urgent phone call from absolutely nobody. Something was definitely up, and spoiler alert, it wasn't good news about the annual bonus structure. I made it to my desk, which sat in that weird middle zone between the executives and the regular employees, a physical representation of my entire existence at this company. See, here's the thing about working at a company your wife owns. You're never quite management, but you're definitely not one of the guys either. You're like Schrodinger's employee, simultaneously privileged and screwed, existing in a quantum state of workplace awkwardness that would make HR textbooks weep. My wife, Clarice, had started this consulting firm 7 years ago with my help, my money, and my countless sleepless nights convincing her she could do it. Back then, she was all nervous energy and big dreams, and I was the idiot who thought mixing business with marriage was a sustainable life choice, right up there with buying lottery tickets for retirement planning and thinking you can change someone. Fast forward to now, and she's the CEO who wears power suits that cost more than my first car, while I'm the director of operations, which is corporate speak for does everything important but gets none of the credit. It's like being the guy who writes all the hit songs, but the pretty face gets to perform them on stage. Actually, scratch that, at least those guys get royalties. I'd barely sat down when my desk phone rang. Internal line. Extension 001. That was Clarice's office. And when your wife, who's also your boss, calls you at 8:17 in the morning, you're either getting promoted or about to have the worst day of your professional life. Given the vibe in the office, I wasn't exactly expecting a raise. Logan, conference room. Now, her voice had that CEO tone, the one she used with vendors who missed deadlines and employees she was about to fire. The fact that she was using it on me, her husband of 8 years, should have been my first clue to just walk out right then and start my new life as a surf instructor in Costa Rica. But no. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I walked to the conference room like a man heading to the gallows, except the gallows was made of tempered glass and had a smart board nobody knew how to use properly. I opened the door, and there they were, the entire HR team looking like they were auditioning for a courtroom drama on basic cable. Janet from HR had her, "I'm so sorry this is happening" face on, which is basically her resting face, but with more sympathy eyebrows. Marcus, her supervisor, was doing that thing where he shuffles papers to look busy and important. And sitting at the head of the table like she was about to launch a hostile takeover of my dignity was Clarice, my wife, looking at me with the warmth of a tax audit. But the real kicker? Sitting right beside her, looking like he'd just won Employee of the Month at the Gap, was Jasper, the intern, the 22-year-old kid who'd been with us for exactly 6 weeks and still asked where the bathroom was twice a day. The guy who thought Synergy was the name of a wellness supplement and probably believed Excel was an energy drink you bought at gas stations. That Jasper. Logan, Clarice said, folding her hands on the table in that way that meant business, bad business. "We've received serious allegations regarding your conduct." I blinked. Conduct? The most scandalous thing I'd done lately was microwave fish in the break room, and even then, I'd apologized profusely and opened all the windows. What conduct could they possibly be talking about? Jasper cleared his throat, and I swear to God, he had the audacity to look wounded, like a puppy that had been kicked. If that puppy was a manipulative little weasel, who couldn't write a proper email to save his life. Mr. Harrison, Janet began, using my last name like we hadn't shared 7 Christmas parties together. Jasper has reported that you've been deliberately sabotaging his projects and undermining his work because you feel threatened by his talent and fresh perspectives. I'm sorry, what? Threatened? By Jasper? The kid who asked me last week if PDFs were like a Microsoft thing and once scheduled a meeting for 30 a.m. because he didn't understand military time? That Jasper? I'd spent the last 6 weeks fixing his mistakes, teaching him basic professional skills, and preventing him from accidentally insulting clients with his overly casual emails that read like text messages to his frat brothers. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation hit me like a freight train made of irony and stupidity, and I just laughed, a genuine belly laugh that echoed through the conference room. Bad move. Terrible move, actually. Career-ending move, as it turned out. Clarice's eyes went glacial, colder than the Ice Queen in every Disney movie combined. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the executive decision being made in real time behind those eyes I used to find beautiful. This is exactly the dismissive attitude Jasper described, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Pack your things. You're terminated. Effective immediately. The room went silent. Janet looked uncomfortable. Marcus pretended to write something important. Jasper had the decency to look down at his phone, probably already drafting his promotion announcement. You're firing me? I asked, the laugh dying in my throat. Clarice, I co-built this company. I've been here since day one. Before day one, actually. I was here on day -30 when we were designing business cards in our apartment. That's irrelevant, she said, standing up, smoothing her skirt like she was brushing away our entire history. Your behavior is detrimental to team morale and company culture. Security will escort you out. And just like that, my wife fired me from our company, the one I'd helped build from nothing, the one I'd invested my savings into, the one I'd sacrificed weekends and anniversaries and normal couple time for, all because some 22-year-old TikTok philosopher decided to play victim and she believed him over me, her husband. I walked out with my box of belongings, my stupid mug that said "World's Okayest Employee" that Rico had given me as a joke, my stapler that I'd bought myself because the company ones were garbage, a framed photo of us from happier times that now felt like evidence from a crime scene, and my dignity hanging by a thread thinner than Jasper's resume. As I passed my former coworkers, now actively avoiding eye contact like I had some contagious disease, I thought to myself, this is going to make a great TED Talk someday. How I lost everything before breakfast, a modern love story. The security guard, Dave, who I'd shared countless conversations with about his daughter's soccer games, walked me to the parking lot without saying a word. Even he couldn't look at me. I loaded my box into my car, a car that still had 2 years of payments left on it, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the building I'd just been escorted out of like a criminal. This was going to be a hell of a story to tell at parties, assuming I ever got invited to parties again. The first week after getting fired by your wife is brutal in ways that self-help books don't prepare you for. It's not just the professional humiliation or the financial panic, though those are definitely part of the fun package. It's the weird, hollow feeling you get when you wake up and realize you have absolutely nowhere to be, no one expecting you, and no purpose beyond figuring out what the hell just happened to your life. I crashed at my buddy Rico's apartment in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up that smelled like a combination of old takeout, regret, and whatever legal herb Rico was into these days. Rico's a freelance DJ who hasn't filed taxes since the Obama era, the first term, and lives his life by the philosophy that receipts are just suggestions, and the IRS is more of a guideline than an actual rule. His apartment reflected this worldview. Organized chaos mixed with the distinct impression that an adult man had given up on adulting somewhere around 2016. The couch I was sleeping on was one of those leather numbers that looked expensive in the store, but had been beaten into submission by years of abuse, late-night gaming sessions, and what I'm pretty sure were stains from every food group known to mankind. It smelled like regret and old pizza, specifically that pizza you order at 2 a.m. when you're drunk and think extra garlic knots are a good life choice. But hey, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to upholstery, and I was definitely in beggar territory. Rico was cool about the whole situation, which is to say he didn't ask too many questions and kept his liquor cabinet well stocked. Mi casa es su casa, bro, he'd said when I showed up at his door at 9 p.m. on a Monday with my pathetic box of office supplies and a face that screamed, "My life is a dumpster fire." He'd taken one look at me, grabbed the box, and pointed to the couch. "The remote's somewhere under the cushions, there's beer in the fridge that's probably still good, and we don't talk about feelings until at least Wednesday." House rules. Every night that first week, I replayed the boardroom scene in my head like some kind of masochistic film critic watching the worst movie of my life on repeat. Clarice's cold eyes, Jasper's fake wounded expression, Janet from HR and her sympathy eyebrows. The way Clarice had said effective immediately, like she was ordering lunch instead of ending my career and our marriage in one efficient corporate power move. The betrayal wasn't just professional, though getting fired sucked in its own special way. It was personal, deeply personal, the kind of personal that makes you question every decision you've made since puberty. I'd helped build Clarice's empire from nothing. Those late nights when she was freaking out about losing our first client, and I talked her off the ledge with cheap wine and cheaper words of encouragement. The endless budget meetings where I crunched numbers until my eyes bled because she wasn't a numbers person. The emotional pep talks when she doubted herself, when she wanted to quit, when she thought maybe she wasn't cut out for running a business. I'd been her biggest cheerleader, her unpaid therapist, her business partner, and her husband, and one clueless intern with delusions of competence had taken it all away with a few well-placed lies. Meanwhile, Jasper was probably updating his LinkedIn profile right that very second, successfully restructured upper management and improved workplace culture through effective communication and leadership. The kid was 22 and had the self-awareness of a golden retriever at a tennis ball factory, but sure, he was a leadership expert now. I bet he even added conflict resolution to his skills section, right next to proficient in Microsoft Word, and can use a stapler. By Wednesday, I'd made the mistake of scrolling through social media, which is universally recognized as a terrible idea when you're already feeling like garbage, but I did it anyway, because apparently I hate myself. Instagram was a nightmare parade of my former life. There was Clarice at some charity gala, wearing a dress that cost more than Rico's monthly rent, smiling that winning smile she reserved for clients and cameras. And right there beside her, looking like he'd just won prom king, was Jasper in a suit that probably came from his dad's closet. The caption read, "Great talent deserves recognition. So proud of our team's innovation and fresh perspectives. Hashtag leadership, hashtag innovation, hashtag future of business. Great talent. Fresh perspectives." I wanted to throw my phone across Rico's apartment, but it was the only thing I owned that still worked, so I restrained myself. Sure, Clarice, recognition. I hoped his talent came with a warranty and a 30-day return policy because that kid was going to crash and burn harder than the Hindenburg, and I was petty enough to want a front row seat. The comments were even worse. Colleagues I'd worked with for years, people I'd helped, people who owed their jobs to projects I'd managed, all leaving heart emojis and congratulatory messages like Jasper had just discovered fire. So inspiring. Love this energy. The future is bright. I wondered if any of them remembered who'd actually built the foundation they were all standing on, or if I'd just been erased from company history like some Soviet-era photograph. Rico found me that night spiraling into an Instagram-induced depression hole, eating ramen straight from the pot, because I couldn't be bothered to find a bowl. "Dude," he said, taking the pot from my hands, "you gotta stop this. She fired you. She's a jerk. He's a bigger jerk. Life goes on. Also, this is my good pot, and you're getting MSG all over my couch." "Sorry," I muttered, wiping my mouth with my sleeve like the classy guy I'd become. "Look, man," Rico said, sitting down next to me with the beer he'd apparently decided I needed. "I've known you since college. You're smart, you're capable, and you built that company as much as she did. Maybe more. So she believed some kid over you? That's her loss, her mistake, her karma coming back to bite her in the designer ass. You're gonna be fine." When I asked, taking the beer because Rico was right about one thing. I definitely needed it. "I dunno, eventually?" Rico shrugged. "I'm a DJ, not a life coach. But I do know that sitting here eating sad noodles and stalking your ex-wife's Instagram isn't gonna help. You need a plan, bro. A revenge plan, a comeback plan, something. Otherwise, you're just gonna be that guy who sleeps on my couch forever, and honestly, my couch has seen better days." He was right, annoyingly right, in the way that friends who've known you too long tend to be. By Friday, something shifted. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom, or maybe it was the fact that Rico's couch was literally developing a Logan-shaped dent, but I stopped the pity-eating noodles routine and started thinking clearly for the first time since Monday. If Clarice wanted reflection, if she wanted me to sit and think about what I'd done wrong, she was about to get her wish. I was going to reflect all right. I was going to reflect so hard she'd see her own reflection burning in those clean glass walls of the company she'd thrown me out of. I was going to reflect until reflection became action, and action became the kind of revenge that's served cold with legal documentation. I pulled out my laptop, the one personal item that wasn't company property, and started making lists. Files I had access to, documents I'd saved, emails that proved my involvement in building the company, contracts with my signature, investment records, everything. Rico walked by with his third coffee of the evening, getting ready for his midnight DJ gig at some club in Manhattan. "That's more like it," he said, seeing me actually doing something besides wallowing. "Welcome back to the land of the living, buddy. Now figure out how to make them pay, and maybe find your own place, because I'm pretty sure my couch is filing a restraining order." I smiled for the first time in days. "Thanks, Rico. For everything." Yeah, don't get all emotional on me. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When you take her down, let me DJ the celebration party. I'm thinking something with a good beat drop right when she realizes she's screwed." "Deal," I said, and got back to work. Revenge, I was learning, requires planning, patience, and a really good internet connection. Fortunately, Rico had 2 out of 3, and the bodega down the street had decent Wi-Fi if you sat near the window. Week 2 of unemployment hit different, as the kids say, though I'm pretty sure they don't mean it in the context of existential career crises and marital implosions. The self-pity phase had officially ended somewhere around day 9 when I realized that feeling sorry for myself wasn't paying Rico's Wi-Fi bill or getting me any closer to making Clarice regret every decision she'd made since hiring Jasper the Wonder Intern. I turned corporate depression into strategy, which sounds way more badass than it actually was. In reality, it meant I showered regularly again, stopped eating cereal for dinner, and converted Rico's coffee table into a makeshift war room that would make conspiracy theorists jealous. No more tears, no pathetic begging, no drunk texting my wife asking her to reconsider, just cold, calculated spreadsheets of vengeance. If there's one thing my years in corporate America taught me, it's that revenge is best served with proper documentation and color-coded Excel tabs. I spent hours digging through my old files, the ones I'd backed up to my personal cloud storage because I'm paranoid about losing work, which turned out to be the smartest paranoia I'd ever had. Ownership documents, email receipts, project proposals, client contracts, budget projections, meeting notes, literally everything from the past 7 years. My fingerprints were everywhere in that company, from the first logo design we'd sketched on a napkin at a diner in Queens to the pitch deck that landed our first $1 million client. I'd been there for every pivot, every crisis, every late-night brainstorming session that saved the company from going under. The more I dug, the angrier I got. But it was a productive anger, the kind that fuels marathons and motivates people to climb mountains or write strongly worded Yelp reviews. Every document I found was another piece of evidence that I wasn't just some employee Clarice could casually dismiss. I was a co-founder in everything but official title, and that oversight on her part was about to become very, very expensive for her. Rico would come home from his gigs at 3 in the morning to find me still awake, surrounded by printed documents and laptop screens, pacing back and forth across his small living room like a caged tiger with spreadsheet access. "Dude," he said one night, setting down his DJ equipment and staring at me with a mixture of concern and amusement. "You look like a divorced James Bond, except instead of martinis and car chases, you've got Excel and highlighted contracts. It's weirdly intense." "Correction," I said, holding up a particularly damning email thread where Clarice explicitly acknowledged my 50% contribution to a major project. "I'm a patient James Bond with evidence. Bond got revenge with gadgets and explosions. I'm getting mine with documentation and contract law, much more civilized." "That's the nerdiest thing you've ever said, and I once heard you explain cryptocurrency for 45 minutes, Rico replied, grabbing a beer from his fridge. But I respect it. You're like if John Wick was an accountant. Very specific set of skills, very boring to watch, but somehow still intimidating. He wasn't wrong. I'd become obsessed with building an airtight case, not just for my own satisfaction, but because I knew Clarice. She was smart, ruthless when it came to business, and had probably already consulted with her own lawyers about protecting herself from any blowback. If I was going to come at her, I needed to come correct, as the saying goes, with every receipt and every piece of evidence documented, cross-referenced, and ready to present to someone who could actually do something with it. That's when I remembered Amira. Amira Hassan was a lawyer friend from my college days, back when we were both young and stupid and thought we could change the world with good intentions and student loan debt. She'd gone to law school while I'd stumbled into the corporate consulting world, but we'd stayed in touch over the years through occasional happy hours and the kind of friendship that survives on memes and birthday texts. More importantly, she specialized in employment law and business disputes, and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in depositions. She once made a CEO cry during a settlement negotiation, and rumor had it she'd framed the tissue he used as a trophy in her office. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon, mentally preparing my pitch. Amira was successful, busy, and probably had better things to do than help her old college buddy with his messy divorce/wrongful termination situation. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Logan Harrison," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Either you're calling to finally take me up on that investment opportunity in my cousin's food truck, or something spectacularly bad has happened in your life. I'm guessing option B based on the fact that you're calling at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, which is when normal employed people are at work." "Your guess is correct," I said, diving right in. "My wife fired me from the company we built together because a 22-year-old intern accused me of sabotaging his projects, which is ridiculous because the kid can barely work the copy machine without creating an office hazard." There was a pause. Then Amira burst out laughing, the kind of genuine, uncontrollable laughter that made me realize how absurd my situation actually sounded when said out loud. "I'm sorry," she managed between laughs. "I'm not laughing at your pain. I'm laughing at the sheer audacity of that scenario. Your wife, who is also your boss, fired you because of an intern? An intern? Does this intern have superpowers? A trust fund? Blackmail material? What am I missing here?" "Apparently, he has youth, enthusiasm, and fresh perspectives," I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Also, he's probably sleeping with her, but I can't prove that yet. That's more of a gut feeling based on the way she defended him and the fact that he's suddenly appearing in all her social media posts like he's her new accessory." "Oh, honey," Amira said, her lawyer voice kicking in. "You don't need to prove an affair for what I'm thinking. Your wife threw you out of a company you helped build because of some kid with delusions of competence. That's not just wrongful termination. That's a business dispute waiting to happen. Tell me you kept records. Please tell me you're not calling me empty-handed." "I have everything," I said, looking at my carefully organized piles of documents. Emails, contracts, financial records, project files, client correspondence. My fingerprints are on every major decision that company made for 7 years. I just need someone who can turn all this evidence into actual consequences. "Logan," Amira said, and I could hear her settling into what I imagined was her lawyer chair, probably already pulling up a legal pad to take notes. "I'm going to ask you a very important question, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you looking for a settlement, or are you looking for blood?" I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Blood. Metaphorical, legal blood. I want her to understand that throwing away 7 years of partnership over an intern's lies was the worst business decision she ever made. I want the company to know I wasn't just some employee. And I want Jasper to learn that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take a few weeks to arrive. "Perfect," Amira said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice, the tone she probably used when she saw a particularly juicy case. "Because I've been dealing with insurance disputes for the past 3 months, and I'm bored out of my mind. Your situation sounds messy, complicated, and exactly the kind of challenge I need. Let's turn you into the ghost that haunts their balance sheets. Let's make them wish they'd treated you better. Let's remind your ex-wife that hell hath no fury like a co-founder scorned." "You're mixing metaphors," I pointed out. "I'm a lawyer, not an English teacher," she shot back. "Now scan me everything you have, And let's start building a case that'll make them regret every smug LinkedIn post and every dismissive email. This is going to be fun. And that's exactly what we did. Over the next several days, Amira and I worked like we were preparing for trial at The Hague instead of a business dispute in New York. She asked questions I hadn't thought of, found angles I'd missed, and turned my pile of evidence into a coherent narrative that painted a very clear picture. I wasn't just an employee, I was a founding partner who'd been illegally forced out. Rico watched our video calls with fascination. It's like watching a heist movie, except instead of stealing diamonds, you're stealing justice. Which is way less exciting, but probably more legal. Definitely more legal. I agreed, highlighting another section of contract law that Amira had sent me to review. For the first time since that awful Monday in the conference room, I felt something other than anger and betrayal. I felt hope, purpose, and the cold satisfaction of knowing that Clarice had made a massive mistake, and I had the receipts to prove it. 3 weeks after getting unceremoniously fired from my own company, my life had settled into a strange new rhythm that I can only describe as organized chaos with legal paperwork. I'd moved out of Rico's apartment after his couch officially filed for disability, found a modest studio in Astoria that smelled like someone's grandmother's potpourri collection, and spent my days working with Amira to build a case so airtight it could survive in space. My nights were dedicated to not checking Clarice's social media, a battle I lost roughly 70% of the time, because I'm only human and humans are fundamentally stupid creatures who enjoy emotional self-harm. It was a Thursday morning, around 10 a.m., and I was sitting at my new IKEA desk that I'd assembled wrong twice before finally getting it right, reviewing some contract amendments Amira had sent over when my doorbell rang. Now, I wasn't expecting anyone. The only people who knew my new address were Rico, Amira, and the very judgmental landlord who'd made it clear she didn't appreciate young people and their loud music, even though the loudest thing I'd played was a podcast about financial planning. So when that doorbell chimed, my first thought was that it was probably a delivery guy with a package for the wrong apartment, which happened approximately 3 times a week in this building. I opened the door in my sweatpants and a college t-shirt that had seen better decades, looking exactly like what I was, a recently unemployed man whose fashion sense had died along with his marriage. And there she was, standing in my hallway like she'd materialized from my worst nightmare or best revenge fantasy, depending on how you looked at it. Clarice, my wife, my ex-boss, my soon-to-be ex-everything, standing there in designer gilt and a Chanel pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was holding a Starbucks cup in each hand, like peace offerings could come in many sizes with extra foam, and had that expression on her face that I'd seen her use with difficult clients. The one that said, "I'm being reasonable, and you should appreciate my reasonableness." "Logan," she said, holding out one of the coffee cups like we were old friends meeting for a casual catch-up instead of estranged spouses in the middle of a corporate warfare situation. "I brought your usual. Caramel macchiato, extra shot, no whip. Can we talk?" I stared at her, then at the coffee, then back at her. The audacity of this woman showing up at my door with a $7 beverage after ruining my life was almost impressive in its sheer nerve. It was like she'd taken a masterclass in how to insult someone while pretending to be nice and graduated with honors. "How did you find my address?" I asked, not taking the coffee because I wasn't about to be bribed with overpriced caffeine, no matter how accurately she'd remembered my order. "I have my ways," she said with a small smile that probably worked on clients, but made me want to shut the door in her face. "Can I come in? We should talk. You've had time to reflect on everything, and I think maybe we both overreacted. Adults should be able to discuss things rationally." Reflect. There was that word again, like I'd been sent to my room to think about what I'd done wrong, when the only thing I'd done wrong was marry someone who valued an intern's lies over her husband's integrity. I'd reflected all right. I'd reflected so hard I could start a meditation retreat for other wrongfully terminated spouses. I'd reflected myself right into a lawyer's office and a case strategy that would make her regret every decision she'd made since Jasper walked into our lives. But instead of saying all that, I smiled, a genuine smile that probably looked slightly unhinged given my current mental state, and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. I have had time to reflect. Come in." I stepped aside, and Clarice walked into my tiny studio apartment with the careful steps of someone entering foreign territory, taking in the second-hand furniture, the IKEA desk that was slightly crooked, the complete absence of the luxury she'd become accustomed to. I could see her mentally cataloging everything, probably thinking about how far I'd fallen, how this proved she'd made the right choice. The coffee cups were still in her hands, props in whatever performance she'd planned. Nice place, she lied, because Clarice was nothing if not professionally polite, even when she was clearly thinking the opposite. Cozy. Cozy is real estate code for smaller than a parking space. But sure, let's go with that, I said, closing the door behind her. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. Tell me why you're here, Clarice, because I know it's not just to deliver overpriced coffee and comment on my living situation. She set both cups down on my wobbly coffee table, another IKEA special that I definitely assembled wrong, and turned to face me with that CEO expression she wore in board meetings. Logan, I think we both said things we didn't mean. The situation got out of hand. Maybe I was too hasty in my decision. You're talented. You know the company inside and out. And I think if we could just sit down and talk through what happened, maybe we could find a way forward. For both of us. Translation. The company was probably struggling without me. Jasper had likely screwed something up spectacularly, and she needed me back, but didn't want to admit she'd made a catastrophic mistake. I could see it in her eyes, that desperation she was trying to hide behind corporate buzzwords and fake reconciliation coffee. A way forward, I repeated, walking over to my desk and picking up a folder I prepared specifically for this moment, because Amira had predicted this would happen with about 90% certainty. You mean like how we moved forward when you fired me in front of HR? Or how we moved forward when you believed a 22-year-old over your husband? That kind of forward. Logan, don't be difficult, she said, her voice taking on that edge that meant her patience was wearing thin. I'm trying to fix this. To fix us. You've had 3 weeks to calm down and think rationally. Surely you can see that we're better together than apart, both personally and professionally. Oh, I've thought rationally, I said, opening the folder and pulling out the papers inside. I've thought very rationally, actually, more rationally than I have in years. And you're right, we should talk about moving forward. So here, I handed her the folder, watching her face as she took it, probably expecting some kind of apology letter or list of conditions for my return. She opened it with that confident smile that was about to die a spectacular death, and I savored every second as her eyes scanned the first page. Divorce papers. Professionally drafted, legally binding, waiting for signatures. Her smile faltered. She flipped to the second page, her face going from confused to pale as she realized what she was looking at. A formal resignation letter from any and all positions at her company, along with a notice of intent to pursue legal action regarding wrongful termination and ownership disputes. 2-for-1 deal, as they say at the discount stores Clarice would never shop at. You can't be serious, she said, looking up at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat and birds were government drones. Logan, this is ridiculous. You're throwing away our marriage, our business, everything we built together over one misunderstanding. One misunderstanding? I felt the anger rising, the kind I'd been keeping controlled for 3 weeks while building my case. Clarice, you fired me. You chose to believe Jasper, a kid who still lists Microsoft Word as a skill on his resume, over me. Your husband, your actual business partner, the guy who was there when you were having panic attacks about losing clients. That wasn't a misunderstanding, that was a choice. Your choice. And now I'm making mine. She was shaking her head, the papers trembling slightly in her hands. Logan, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I can fix this. Just tell me what you want. Too late, I said, and meant it. You wanted me to reflect? I reflected, right into a lawyer's office. Right into realizing that I deserve better than someone who throws me away the moment it's convenient. Sign the papers, Clarice. Or don't. Either way, I'm done. That's when it happened, the moment that made everything worth it. Her phone, sitting in her designer purse on my coffee table, buzzed with a text notification. The screen lit up, visible to both of us, and there it was in all its glory. Did he sign it? Eyes, Jasper. Her face went pale, ghost white, the kind of pale you see in horror movies right before someone realizes they're about to die. She grabbed her phone so fast, she nearly knocked over the untouched coffee cups, but it was too late. I'd seen it. She knew I'd seen it. The whole carefully constructed facade of wanting to fix things and moving forward together crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a tsunami. That's not, she started, but I held up my hand. Save it, I said, walking to the door and opening it. You and Jasper clearly had this whole thing planned. Come here, play the regretful wife. Get me to sign whatever you needed signed. Probably some kind of settlement that screws me over while making you look generous. Am I close? She didn't answer, just stood there clutching her phone like it was evidence at a crime scene. Which, legally speaking, it kind of was. Get out, Clarice, I said, no longer angry, just tired. Take your guilt coffee and your fake apologies and your intern boyfriend and get out of my apartment. My lawyer will be in touch. She walked past me, and for just a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered the conference room, the humiliation, the 3 weeks of sleeping on Rico's couch, and the feeling passed quicker than Jasper's competence in any given work situation. As she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, allowing myself one small smile of satisfaction. Round 1. Logan. Now, if you're expecting some dramatic movie scene where I stormed back into the office with a megaphone and a PowerPoint presentation titled, Why Clarice is the Worst, a documentary, you'd be dead wrong. That's amateur hour, the kind of revenge that feels good for 30 seconds and then lands you with a restraining order and a reputation as that crazy ex-husband. No, I went full stealth mode, the kind of strategic, calculated approach that keeps lawyers employed and makes insurance companies nervous. While Clarice was presumably having her little meltdown about the divorce papers and the fact that her manipulation attempt had backfired more spectacularly than New Coke, I was busy with Amira, preparing a legal storm that Clarice wouldn't see coming until it was already raining subpoenas and court dates. See, the thing about revenge is that the best kind isn't loud or obvious. It's quiet, methodical, and backed up by so much documentation that it could fill a small library or at least crash a Google Drive account. Amira had moved into full lawyer mode, which was both terrifying and impressive to witness. She'd transformed from my college buddy who once did karaoke to Britney Spears while drunk into a legal assassin who probably had a vision board somewhere labeled, People I'm going to destroy in court this quarter. We met at her office in Midtown, a sleek space that screamed success and had coffee that was actually good, not the burnt disaster most offices try to pass off as beverages. Okay, Amira said, spreading out documents across her massive glass desk like a general planning a military campaign. Here's what we've got. Your ex-wife, in her infinite wisdom and complete lack of legal foresight, quietly restructured the company about 8 months ago to make herself the sole decision-maker and primary owner. Very subtle, very sneaky, very much the kind of thing people do when they're planning to screw someone over eventually. 8 months ago, I interrupted, doing the math in my head. That was right around when Jasper started his internship. She was planning this. Either that or she just wanted more control and your firing was opportunistic, Amira shrugged, tapping her pen against a particularly damning contract. Either way, here's the beautiful part. She restructured on paper, filed some forms, probably paid some expensive consultant to make it all look legal and official. But, and this is a big but, cannot emphasize this enough, your signature is still on several original contracts. Partnership agreements, incorporation documents, intellectual property filings, the works. Which means her sole ownership isn't so solo after all. It's like she tried to remove you from a group photo but forgot you're also in the background of every other picture. I leaned forward, trying to understand the legal implications while also enjoying the schadenfreude of knowing Clarice had screwed up. So what does that mean in normal person English? It means, Amira said with a smile that would make sharks nervous, that she doesn't actually own the company outright. You have legal grounds to claim partial ownership, possibly up to 50% depending on how good the judge's mood is and how badly her lawyers fumble their arguments. She tried to erase you from the company history, but legally, you're still written into the foundation. You can't just white out someone from business contracts like they're a typo in a high school essay. That's the best news I've heard since the barista spelled my name right at Starbucks, I said, feeling actual hope for the first time in weeks. It gets better, Amira continued, pulling up something on her laptop and turning it to face me. Remember how you said you helped secure most of the major clients? I've been going through the contracts you provided, and your name appears on approximately 78% of all initial client agreements as the primary contact or negotiator. That's not just evidence of your involvement. That's proof that the company's success is directly tied to your work. Any judge with half a brain is going to see that you weren't just some employee she could fire on a whim. You were integral to the business operations. I sat back, letting it all sink in. 3 weeks ago, I'd been sitting on Rico's couch eating sad noodles and questioning my entire existence. Now I had a legal case that could potentially destroy everything Clarice had tried to build without me. It felt good, really good. The kind of good that probably makes therapists concerned, but whatever. I'd deal with my moral ambiguity later. So what's our next move? I asked, ready to do whatever it took. We file, Amira said simply. We file a claim for partial ownership. We file for wrongful termination. We file for damages, both monetary and reputational. And we file so many motions that her legal team will need to hire additional legal teams just to keep up with the paperwork. We're going to bury her in litigation, Logan. Not because we're mean, but because it's justified, and also a little bit because we're mean. While we were planning our legal assault, my phone buzzed with a notification that I'd stupidly not turned off. Instagram, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment and emotional masochism. I almost ignored it, but something made me check, probably the same instinct that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. It was Jasper. Of course it was Jasper, because the universe has a sick sense of humor and enjoys my suffering. He'd posted a picture of himself at a coffee shop, looking thoughtful and philosophical in that way that 22-year-olds think makes them look deep, but actually makes them look constipated. The caption read, "Some men can't handle strong women. Growth means leaving toxic people behind. Hashtag boss life, hashtag know your worth, hashtag moving forward." I stared at my phone, reading the caption 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress and too much legal coffee. This kid, this absolute muppet of a human being who probably still had his mom doing his laundry, was posting inspirational quotes about strong women and toxic people, like he was Oprah instead of an intern who'd been employed for 6 weeks and had the professional skills of a potato. "You okay?" Amira asked, noticing my expression, which had probably gone from neutral to homicidal in about 3 seconds. "Jasper just posted on Instagram," I said, turning my phone to show her. "Apparently I'm the toxic one who can't handle strong women. Me, the guy who spent 7 years building a business with his wife. I'm toxic. Not the intern who lied to get me fired, but me." Amira read the caption, and I watched her jaw clench in that way that meant she was adding this to her mental list of grievances to use in court. "You know what? I'm adding defamation to the list of potential claims. That's borderline libel if anyone connects those dots to your situation, which they will because corporate circles are smaller than people think." "Is that legal?" I asked, not entirely sure how social media posts factored into legal battles. "Let me worry about what's legal," Amira said, making a note on her legal pad in handwriting that looked like organized chaos. "You just keep collecting evidence of their stupidity, and I'll turn it into billable hours and courtroom gold." Over the next several days, we worked like possessed people, preparing our filings with the kind of attention to detail that would make obsessive-compulsive people proud. We documented everything. Every contribution I'd made to the company, every client I'd brought in, every late night and weekend I'd worked, every financial investment I'd made from my own pocket, every email that proved my involvement, every contract with my signature, every single piece of evidence that showed I wasn't just an employee, but a founding partner who'd been illegally forced out based on false allegations from an intern with delusions of competence. Amira put together a legal brief that was basically a novel-length documentation of Clarice's mistakes, complete with exhibits, appendices, and footnotes. It was beautiful in a very nerdy, legally aggressive way. We filed for partial ownership recognition, claiming 50% based on my initial investment and ongoing contributions. We filed for wrongful termination with evidence of the false allegations. We filed for damages including lost wages, reputational harm, and emotional distress, because apparently you can put a dollar amount on, "My wife believed an intern over me, and now I have trust issues." "Full receipts," Amira said, organizing the final documents into neat folders that would be delivered to the courthouse and Clarice's legal team simultaneously. Every email, every contract, every contribution, every lie they told. We're not just fighting back, Logan. We're building an airtight case that proves you were essential to that company's success, and that removing you was both illegal and stupid. How long until she knows what's coming? I asked, signing my name on what felt like the 100th document. The papers will be served tomorrow morning, Amira said, checking her watch. So probably about 12 hours until her lawyer calls her in a panic, and about 13 hours until she realizes she made a very expensive mistake. I'm going to enjoy this. Is that bad? I feel like I should feel bad about enjoying this, but I really don't. That makes two of us, I said, signing the last page with a flourish that felt unnecessarily dramatic but satisfying. We weren't just preparing a legal case. We were preparing a reckoning, the kind that comes with court dates and legal fees and the slow, dawning realization that actions have consequences, even when you're a CEO with designer suits and an inflated sense of your own infallibility. Clarice wanted me to reflect? Well, she was about to see her own reflection in every legal document we were about to file. And it wasn't going to be pretty. The day I walked back into that company, exactly 4 weeks and 2 days after being escorted out like a common criminal who'd been caught stealing printer paper, the atmosphere was so thick with tension you could have cut it with a knife, or at least with one of those fancy letter openers executives keep on their desks to look important. People stopped mid-stride in the hallways, coffee cups frozen halfway to mouths, conversations dying faster than my marriage had. They looked at me like I was a ghost, or worse, an ex-husband with legal documents and a vendetta, which was significantly more terrifying than any supernatural entity. Sandra from accounting actually dropped her phone when she saw me walking through the lobby with Amira at my side. Both of us dressed in business attire that screamed, "We mean business, and also we have lawyers." Mike from sales pretended to be very interested in a potted plant, literally turning his entire body to face a decorative ficus like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Even Barry, the fantasy football guy who never shut up, managed to keep his mouth closed for once in his life, which was honestly kind of miraculous. The board meeting had been requested by Amira through official legal channels, which is lawyers speak for, "We're coming whether you like it or not, and you have to let us in or it looks bad in court." Clarice had no choice but to agree, probably after her own lawyers told her that refusing would be admitting guilt or at least admitting that she had something to hide, which she absolutely did. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room, the big one with the glass walls and the fancy table that cost more than most people's cars, the room where major decisions were made and apparently where marriages went to die. I walked into that conference room like I owned the place, because legally speaking, I might actually own about half of it, and the energy shifted immediately. The board members were already seated, looking uncomfortable in that way people do when they know they're about to witness either a spectacular resolution or a complete disaster, with no middle ground in sight. There was Gerald, the CFO, who'd always liked me but also liked his paycheck more. Patricia, the head of operations, who'd gone completely silent in her emails to me after my firing, clearly choosing Team Clarice over Team Common Sense. And Marcus from HR, the same Marcus who'd sat quietly during my termination, probably practicing his "I'm just following orders" defense for later. And there, sitting at the head of the table like she still owned the entire world and everyone in it, was Clarice. She looked tired, which gave me a small amount of petty satisfaction that I'm not proud of, but also not sorry about. Her designer suit was impeccable as always, but there were slight bags under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't completely hide. The stress was getting to her, and good. About time she felt some of what I'd been feeling for the past month. 2 seats over from her, looking significantly less confident than his Instagram post suggested, was Jasper. He was wearing a suit that still looked like it came from his dad's closet, too big in the shoulders and slightly too short in the sleeves, trying desperately to look professional and important. He had a notepad in front of him, a fancy pen that probably cost more than it should, and he was very obviously pretending to take notes while actually doodling what looked like planets or maybe just circles, because expecting actual note-taking from Jasper was like expecting a goldfish to file taxes. "Logan," Clarice said, her voice strained and professional, the tone she used when she was trying very hard not to show emotion. "I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish with this meeting, but..." "Oh, I think you know exactly what we're here to accomplish," Amira interrupted smoothly, setting her briefcase on the table with a satisfying thud that echoed through the conference room like a judge's gavel. But let me clarify for everyone present. We're here to present evidence regarding Mr. Harrison's ownership stake in this company, his wrongful termination, and the various legal violations that occurred during said termination. Should be fun. Well, fun for us, anyway. She pulled out folders, so many folders, each one carefully labeled and color-coded because Amira was nothing if not organized in her destruction of people's lives. The board members leaned forward slightly, curiosity winning over corporate loyalty. Even Gerald looked interested, probably doing mental math about how this would affect his quarterly reports. As you all know, Amira began, opening the first folder with the kind of dramatic flair that lawyers must practice in law school. Mr. Harrison was terminated 4 weeks ago based on allegations from an intern. She paused, looking directly at Jasper, who suddenly found his doodles very interesting. An intern who, according to his employment records, had been with the company for exactly 6 weeks at the time of his allegations, and whose primary qualifications include, let me check, enthusiasm and proficiency in Microsoft Office, which I'm told is now a skill people list on resumes. Someone at the end of the table, I think it was Patricia, made a sound that could have been a cough or a suppressed laugh. Hard to tell, but I appreciated it either way. What's your point? Clarice interjected, her voice sharp with barely controlled anger. Logan was fired for legitimate reasons. This is just a vindictive ex-husband trying to. This, Amira said, pulling out a document and sliding it across the table toward the board members, is proof of Mr. Harrison's initial capital investment in this company. $50,000 7 years ago, when this company was just an idea and a dream. That's not an employee contribution, Mrs. Harrison. That's a founding partner investment. Clarice's face froze mid-blink, like someone had hit pause on a video. The board members were passing around copies of the investment documents, and I could see the moment it clicked for each of them. Gerald's eyebrows went up. Patricia's mouth formed a small O of surprise. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. This is absurd, Clarice snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. That was a personal loan, not an investment. We were married. Couples help each other financially. Actually, Amira said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. This is ownership law, Exhibit A through Z. And if it was a personal loan, as you claim, you would have loan documentation, repayment schedules, interest rates, literally any paperwork that proves it was a loan and not an investment. Do you have any of that documentation, Mrs. Harrison? Silence. Beautiful, damning silence. Amira continued, laying out document after document like she was dealing cards at the world's most aggressive poker game. Client contracts with my signature. Project proposals I'd written. Email chains proving my involvement in major business decisions. Patent filings with my name alongside Clarice's. Financial records showing my ongoing contributions, both in money and labor, well beyond what any normal employee would provide. Mr. Harrison wasn't just an employee you could terminate at will, Amira explained to the increasingly uncomfortable board members. He was a co-founder, a business partner, and his removal from the company based on unsubstantiated allegations from a 6-week intern constitutes not only wrongful termination, but also potential fraud regarding ownership rights. That's when Jasper, in what I can only describe as the worst decision of his young life, decided to whisper something to Clarice. He leaned over, probably trying to be subtle, maybe trying to offer some kind of support or strategy, but Amira's hearing was apparently superhuman because she turned to face him with the kind of look that makes people reconsider their life choices. Hush, Junior, Amira said, her voice sweet as poison honey. Adults are talking. This is a legal proceeding regarding business ownership and corporate law, not an internship seminar on how to destroy people's careers with lies. So maybe, just maybe, you could sit there quietly and contemplate the choices that led you to this moment. The room went completely silent. Someone at the end of the table, definitely Patricia this time, coughed to hide a laugh. Gerald wasn't even trying to hide his smile, probably enjoying the drama more than anything that had happened in a board meeting all year. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through his chair and disappear into the floor. Jasper's face turned red, The kind of red that starts at the neck and spreads upward like a really embarrassing thermometer. He opened his mouth, probably to protest or defend himself, but Clarice put her hand on his arm, stopping him. Even she knew that letting Jasper talk right now would be like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already burning her carefully constructed empire to the ground. Clarice's empire, the one she tried to claim as solely hers, suddenly looked like a Jenga tower missing too many blocks, wobbling precariously and about to fall. You could see it in her eyes, the realization that she'd made a massive miscalculation, that firing me had been not just personally cruel, but legally stupid, that believing Jasper over documented evidence and 7 years of partnership had been the kind of mistake that ends careers and companies. We'll be filing formal claims for 50% ownership recognition, Amira concluded, packing up her folders with the satisfied air of someone who'd just won a chess game in record time. Additionally, we're pursuing damages for wrongful termination, reputational harm, and emotional distress. My client built this company alongside Mrs. Harrison, and he deserves recognition for that contribution, legally, financially, and professionally. As we stood to leave, I caught Clarice's eye one last time. She looked broken, defeated, nothing like the confident CEO who'd fired me a month ago. And I wish I could say I felt bad about it, that seeing her like this made me regret the legal action. But I'd be lying. After that boardroom meeting, something beautiful happened, and by beautiful, I mean the kind of slow-motion disaster that you can't look away from, like watching an expensive vase fall off a table in Super HD. I didn't need to lift another finger, didn't need to make another move, didn't need to do anything except sit back with metaphorical popcorn and watch the consequences of Clarice's terrible decisions ripple through her company like a tsunami through a sandcastle convention. Whispers spread fast in corporate environments, faster than actual news, faster than emails, faster than those rumors about who hooked up at the Christmas party. By the afternoon of our boardroom presentation, everyone in that building knew something major had gone down. The details were probably wrong, exaggerated, mixed with speculation and gossip, but the core message was clear. Logan Harrison wasn't just some fired employee. He was a co-founder with legal receipts, and the CEO had royally screwed up by throwing him out over an intern's lies. I know this because Rico, who has a network of people in various industries that would make the CIA jealous, started forwarding me messages from his friend who knew someone who worked in the building. Yo, did you really walk in with a lawyer and drop documents like you were serving subpoenas at a family reunion? One message read. Everyone's saying the CEO's husband owned half the company and she fired him anyway. That's wild. Also, is the intern really that incompetent, or is that part exaggerated? The intern part is not exaggerated, I texted back. If anything, it's understated. The kid once asked me if PDFs were edible. That can't be real. I wish I was joking. The whispers turned into full conversations, and those conversations reached the people who actually mattered, the investors. The people with money. The people who kept the company afloat. The people who got very nervous when they heard words like ownership dispute and legal action. And potential fraud. Investors are like cats, easily spooked by sudden movements and loud noises, and nothing spooks investors quite like the possibility that the company they've invested in might be built on legally questionable foundations. I heard through my network, which was apparently still functioning despite my termination, that the board started having emergency meetings. Not the scheduled, calendar invite type of meetings, but the everyone drop what you're doing and get in here right now panic meetings that happen when something's gone terribly wrong. They were asking awkward questions, the kind Clarice probably didn't have good answers for. Questions like, so, who's actually in charge here? And is this ownership structure legally sound? And my personal favorite, why didn't anyone tell us there was a co-founder we were unaware of? Gerald, the CFO who I'd always gotten along with, apparently grew a spine and started asking for documentation of everything. Every decision Clarice had made regarding the company structure, every termination, every restructuring, every single piece of paper that could potentially be used in court. He was covering his own ass, obviously, because CFOs don't stay CFOs by going down with sinking ships, but it had the beautiful side effect of making Clarice's life absolutely miserable. Patricia from operations, who'd ghosted me after my firing, suddenly started sending apologetic emails. Logan, I had no idea about the circumstances, one read. If I'd known the full situation, I would have spoken up. Can we talk? I deleted them without responding because Patricia had every opportunity to speak up during my termination and chose silence instead. Too little, too late, Patricia. Enjoy your sinking ship. The LinkedIn updates started appearing within a week, and they were absolutely delicious in their corporate speak desperation. Clarice Industries undergoing internal restructuring to better serve our clients and stakeholders. Translation: we're on fire. Please send water. Also, if anyone wants to invest, we promise we're totally fine and definitely not dealing with massive legal problems. Excited to announce organizational changes that will strengthen our foundation. Translation: our foundation was apparently built on lies, and we're frantically trying to fix it before everything collapses. Committed to transparency and excellence during this transition period. Translation: we have no idea what we're doing, but we're hoping if we use enough buzzwords, people won't notice we're panicking. I just sat in my studio apartment, eating actual popcorn because the metaphorical kind wasn't satisfying enough, refreshing LinkedIn every few hours like I was watching a reality TV show, except this reality show was my ex-wife's professional life falling apart in real time, and I had front row seats. The best part, though, the absolute cherry on top of this schadenfreude Sunday, was what happened to Jasper. Remember Jasper? The intern who started this whole mess? The kid who thought he was hot shit and posted inspirational quotes about toxic people and strong women, while having the professional competence of a potato with a LinkedIn account? Yeah, Jasper stopped showing up to the office. At first, nobody noticed because Jasper's contributions to the company were approximately zero, so his absence had the same impact as removing a decorative plant from the lobby. But then word started spreading that he'd been reassigned to another department, which is corporate HR speak for we're hiding him in a closet somewhere and hoping everyone forgets he exists. According to my sources, and by sources I mean Rico's friend's sister who worked 2 floors down, Jasper had been moved to some back office position doing data entry or filing or something equally mindless that even he couldn't screw up too badly. They couldn't fire him outright without it looking like they were admitting he'd lied about me, which would strengthen my legal case. But they also couldn't keep him in his previous position because everyone now knew he was either a liar or incompetent or both. So Jasper got the corporate equivalent of being sent to his room. Still technically employed, still getting a paycheck, but completely removed from anything important or visible. His Instagram went quiet too. No more inspirational posts about boss life or knowing your worth. Either someone with a functioning brain told him to shut up, or he'd finally realized that posting about his professional wisdom while being demoted to the equivalent of an HR broom closet was not the flex he thought it was. My phone buzzed one evening while I was enjoying this slow-motion corporate collapse. A text from Clarice. Can we please talk privately? Just you and me, no lawyers, no board members. We need to discuss this situation like adults. I stared at the message for a solid minute, debating whether to respond or just let it sit there unread like a desperate text from an ex at 2 a.m. The audacity of asking for a private conversation after everything, after the public firing, after the boardroom humiliation, after choosing to believe Jasper over me, was almost impressive in its sheer nerve. Before I could even formulate a response, my phone rang. Amira, probably sensing through some kind of lawyer telepathy that Clarice was trying to circumvent proper legal channels. Did she just text you asking to talk privately? Amira asked without preamble. How did you know? Because I just got an email from her lawyer asking the same thing. They're panicking, Logan. They want to settle before this goes any further, before more investors pull out, before the press gets wind of the full story. They're hoping you'll agree to some quick private settlement that makes this all go away quietly. And what do you think I should do? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I think you should let me handle it, Amira said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You hired a lawyer for a reason. Let me do my job, which is to make sure they don't try to lowball you or manipulate you into accepting less than you deserve. Trust me, whatever offer they make privately will be significantly less than what we can get through proper legal channels. So I just ignore the text. You forward it to me as evidence that they're trying to negotiate outside of proper legal representation, which actually helps our case, and then you go back to enjoying the show. Your job right now is to do nothing, which, coincidentally, is what Jasper's doing in his new position. Except you're doing it by choice and getting paid way better for it. I forwarded the text to Amira and blocked Clarice's number, not out of anger, but out of practicality. Every conversation we had without lawyers present was a potential minefield, and I was done stepping on mines for people who'd already blown up my life once. Sure enough, within an hour, Amira texted me. Her lawyer responded to my response. They want to discuss settlement terms. Translation: they know they're screwed and want to minimize damage. This is good for us. Very good. I sat back on my second-hand couch in my tiny studio apartment, considerably smaller and less impressive than the home I'd shared with Clarice, and smiled. The empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even needed to push it. I'd just pointed out that the foundation was unstable, provided documentation proving it, and watched gravity do the rest. Somewhere across the city, Clarice was probably having an emergency meeting with her lawyers, her board, her accountants, everyone she'd trusted to build her empire, all of them now telling her the same thing. You screwed up, and it's going to cost you. And somewhere in a back office, Jasper was probably filing documents or entering data or doing whatever meaningless task they'd assigned him. His dreams of corporate success replaced with the reality of being the guy everyone blamed for triggering a legal disaster. The official legal filing happened on a Tuesday morning, precisely at 9 a.m., because Amira believed in punctuality and also in maximizing dramatic impact. We filed for half of the company assets, half of the profit share going back 3 years, recognition as co-founder, damages for wrongful termination, and basically everything short of demanding Clarice's firstborn child. Though honestly at this point, I wouldn't have been surprised if Amira had found a legal precedent for that too. The papers were served to Clarice at her office, hand-delivered by a process server who apparently reported back to Amira that the CEO had gone very pale, then very red, then asked if this was a joke, before realizing that legal documents are generally not known for their sense of humor. I wasn't there for that initial moment, but I wish I had been, just to see the exact second when Clarice understood the full scope of what was coming her way. That moment when it clicks that you're not just dealing with an angry ex-husband, but an angry ex-husband with documentation, legal representation, and a legitimate case that could potentially cut her empire in half like a divorce settlement from hell. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, which in legal time is basically immediate, like the court equivalent of Amazon Prime delivery. Amira explained that given the nature of the ownership dispute and the potential impact on the company's operations, the judge had fast-tracked our case, which was either a sign that we had a strong position or that the judge just wanted to get this mess sorted out before it turned into an even bigger mess. Either way worked for me. I showed up to the courthouse in a suit I'd borrowed from Rico, who apparently owned exactly one suit for funerals, court dates, and fancy DJ gigs where they require not looking like a slob. It fit reasonably well, which is to say it fit better than Jasper's oversized disaster, and I looked like a functioning adult who had his life together, which was about 60% accurate on a good day. Amira met me outside the courtroom, looking like she'd been born in a pantsuit and raised on legal briefs. "Ready?" she asked, adjusting her briefcase like a warrior checking her weapon before battle. As ready as I'll ever be to potentially bankrupt my ex-wife in front of a judge and several witnesses, I said, straightening my borrowed tie that Rico had tied for me, because apparently I'd forgotten how ties worked since losing my job. "That's the spirit," Amira grinned. "Remember, let me do the talking. Your job is to sit there, look wronged but dignified, and try not to smile too much when things go our way. Judges don't like it when people look too happy about litigation." We walked into the courtroom, which was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room that someone had decorated with wood paneling and a judge's bench to make it look official. There were a handful of people already seated, the court reporter, a bailiff who looked bored enough to be thinking about his lunch plans, and some administrative staff who were probably wondering why they'd chosen careers in the legal system when they could have been literally anywhere else. And then there was Clarice's side of the room. She sat with her legal team, 2 lawyers in expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, both of them looking like they specialized in making problems go away for wealthy clients, and were currently realizing that this particular problem wasn't going away easily. Clarice herself looked like she hadn't slept in days, which gave me a small petty satisfaction that I've stopped apologizing for. Her hair was still perfect, her suit still designer, but there was something in her eyes that screamed, "I'm barely holding it together and also deeply regretting my life choices." Jasper was not present, thank God, because having that kid in a courtroom would have been like bringing a toddler to an opera, disruptive and pointless. Apparently, even Clarice's lawyers had enough sense to keep him away from legal proceedings where his presence would only remind everyone that this entire disaster started because she believed in Intern over documented evidence. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s who had the look of someone who'd seen every type of corporate drama imaginable and was thoroughly unimpressed by all of it.